Laura was flattered that they wanted her to join their group this much. They'd even saved a seat for Paget. Then she was bumped from behind, and a guy with an enormous tray of drinks sidled past her, putting down the tray on the table and taking the available seat. Everyone reached forward and grabbed their drinks, and Adam waved Paget over. "You made it!" Adam shouted. "We have beer if you'd like some." "Oh, no thanks. I'm more of a wine drinker," she shouted back. "Hey, take my spot and I'll get you a glass," the beer guy yelled. He was rather cute in a grungy haven't showered or shaved in a week way. Older than the regular college crowd, more Paget's age. "That's okay," Paget said. "I can get it." "No, you'll get crushed, or worse yet, some guy will hit on you before I can." He grinned at her and offered her his chair. "Please, have a seat." "Thanks." It was hard to turn him down. He was rather handsome when he smiled like that. Plus, it was the only available chair, and she had no intention of standing all night in these shoes. "What kind of wine?" his voice said beside her ear as he leaned down to catch her answer. "Chateau Margaux." Paget stopped herself. Sometimes it was hard to remember that the places she went to wouldn't have such wines, and even if they did, there was no way she could afford a bottle that equated the amount of her monthly rent. "Sorry, house brand, red." "Will do." Within a moment he was lost in the crowd. "Isn't he hot?" one of the girls asked, giggling. "Oh, Max is a little too old for you," Adam grinned, and then winked at Paget. "I was hoping to set him up with Paget here. In fact, I think he likes her already." "Adam," Paget warned, "I'm not looking for anyone right now." "Hey, you never know," he said innocently to her. "We met Max a couple of weeks ago. Every time we come here, it's such a crush that we just pay for his beer and he gets us our drinks. Makes it so much easier," Mariah said. "Plus, he's a lot of fun to hang around." "You just met him and hang out with him now?" Paget asked. Part of her was surprised by the casual acceptance these kids had with others. Didn't anyone warn them that people could be serial killers? She tried to shoo her mother's cynical voice out of her head, but it persisted. What did an older guy want with a bunch of college kids anyhow? Wasn't it sort of creepy? Never mind that she was an older woman hanging with them, since she was technically a college attendee too. "Sure, we met him at the park on Elm Street." Mariah cupped her hand under a nacho loaded with cheese and veggies as she brought it to her mouth. You've got to try these. They are so good." "Like Freddy Krueger Elm Street?" Once again, Paget's mouth ran ahead of her brain. She grimaced after she made the comment. "Huh?" 6 pairs of puzzled eyes looked at her. "Old movie, never mind." Paget felt she was showing her age again. She mentally winced and berated herself to keep current so she wouldn't endure more blank stares. Sasha typed away into his mobile phone and then held it up for everyone to see. "It's a horror flick! Nightmare on Elm Street. That's funny." A collective of nods went around the table before they launched into a discussion about how to strategize the best way to win the game of Catan. Paget let the conversation wash over her. She'd never played the game and really didn't know what the appeal was. Lost in her thoughts, she nearly jumped out of her skin when a husky voice talked in her ear. "I have no idea what they are talking about." Max set the wine on the table. "Can I have my seat back?" Sure." Paget automatically stood and then realized she would have nowhere to sit. She picked up her wine glass and wondered how awkward this was going to be with her being the only one standing. "Have a seat." Max pointed to his leg, offering her to sit on him. Paget raised an eyebrow. "I don't know you that well." "But you could," he smiled suggestively. "Don't worry, I promise to behave. Nothing the lady doesn't want." Already Paget's feet were starting to hurt. She'd walked to the bar in these shoes because they were so pretty, but pretty did not equal comfortable. They were in a public place. It wasn't like he could really do anything. "I promise not to bite, nor feel you up. At least not today. Sit down and enjoy yourself." His brown eyes twinkled. Paget rolled her eyes and perched gingerly on his leg. He was muscular, had slightly curly black hair that was in desperate need of a cut, and smelled distinctly male. Like grass and sweat. It wasn't entirely pleasant. It must have come directly from work instead of showering first. She wondered if he did landscaping for a living. He was so tan. "So, what do you do?" Paget asked brilliantly. "Me?" "No, the guy behind you," Paget said as she cocked her head to the side to study him a little better. Max laughed. "I do some consulting and supervising here and there. Right now I'm on a bit of a vacation while I wait for some paperwork to clear. Just enjoying life for a while." "That's cool." Paget took a sip of wine and noticed that his hand had crept around her and was now resting on her hip comfortably. "Planning any neat activities?" "Mostly seeing where life takes me." Max took a drink of beer. "Are you one of their professors?" "Me?" "No, the guy behind you." He repeated her words back to her. Paget laughed without really meaning to. "No, I've gone back to school. Sadly, I am one of the students." Why is that sad? I think it's great. It's important to learn new things. When he smiled, she realized he was missing a molar right behind his top left canine tooth. I'm reading a book on astrology so I can name the stars that I see in the sky. So far, I'm only one chapter in, but it's pretty interesting. What are you studying? Media and broadcasting studies. When I was younger, I always wanted to be on the radio or in television news. Why didn't you pursue it when you were younger? Paget shrugged and took a sip of wine. It was surprisingly okay for a house brand, not that she was any connoisseur of cheap wines. I suppose life got in the way. Now it may be a little late. How's that? Paget nodded at Adam. He keeps telling me that TV and radio are dead, that they are on their way out, and the world just hasn't realized it yet. Oh, I don't know. There are televisions in the bar here. Sure enough, there were a number of guys looking at the highlights of the latest baseball game. Adam says the percentage of cord cutters and cord nevers is rising. Those are people who never subscribe to satellite or cable, Paget explained. It's risen to 56 million people in America alone. You Googled it, he guessed? Yes. Makes me think that I should have chosen something more sensible to study, like insurance. Oh, I don't know. Maybe you're in at the perfect time. He really did have the most amazing chocolate-colored eyes. She dragged her attention away from them. What do you mean? It's been my experience that when one industry is dying, another comes up to take its place. It's not that these people aren't consuming material, it's just that they're getting their material from a different source. Max nodded to the group. See how many of them have a phone? Cell phones are the new television, radio, personal assistant, social networks, whatever a person needs. The trend is shifting from one device to another. Rather like the oven to the microwave, only faster this time. And since you're smart enough to realize this, you're ahead of everyone who doesn't. You just need to figure out how to translate what you're learning to the internet, to social media, to programs like Netflix. That's how you get ahead of the curve. Pretty smart for a landscaper. During their conversation, one of her hands had crept up to rest along his broad shoulder. It was easier to balance on his leg that way. At least that's what she told herself. I hadn't thought of it like that. Glad I could change your perspective. Hey, it's so nice that you guys could hang out with your mom and dad. A troop of sorority girls stopped, and the ringleader's voice was sugarly sweet. I mean, it's hard to have real friends, but you'll always have your parents. The group paused, embarrassed by the public taunting being thrown their way. Are we that old? Max asked Paget. We're not that old. Thanks to the 3-inch heels, Paget could look the ringleader in the eye, who was smiling in satisfaction over her barb. Really? Paget asked. Do you really need to make people feel bad? Is there something wrong with you that makes you feel better to put people down? We're just having a nice night, so I'd appreciate it if you go away. The girl glared at Paget, and Paget glared right back. She was through dealing with people like this girl. People who belittled others because they had less. Less money, less time, less knowing the right people, not having the right job. Less, like Paget now was. Did I ask you to psychoanalyze me? She looked Paget up and down like she was some particularly foul thing. Somebody should, Paget muttered. You need therapy if you're this mean all the time. The next thing Paget knew, a cold beer was being poured down the front of her shirt. Ha! The sorority girl practically yelled her triumph in Paget's face. Let's go, girls. The posse beat a hasty retreat through the crowd, and Paget was left dripping wet, and the next table of college guys were torn between ogling her breasts and laughing. There was a clapping from Adam's table, the table of nerds that Paget had just defended. Way to go, Red! Paget gave a weak smile to them and tried to hold her sopping shirt away from her chest. Whoa, who knew girls could be so mean? Max's sexy voice said in Paget's ear as he offered a handful of napkins which weren't going to be enough. Paget took the napkins from Max and rubbed uselessly at her front. Why don't you go to the washroom and change your shirt? Because I don't have another one? Look, guys, thanks for the evening, but I think I'll just head home, Paget smiled through their protests. It's all good, I'll just pay for the wine and go. No, we got the wine, Adam said. Please don't go, we're having so much fun. You can have mine. Excuse me? Paget looked at those deep chocolate eyes. They really were something. His voice was good too, low and sexy. My shirt, I'm wearing a tee under this one. He literally stripped right in front of her. Well, one shirt anyways. Underneath, sure enough, he had a second shirt on. He offered the bundle of shirt in his hand to her. Paget wasn't sure what to do. It wasn't like he was the cleanest person in the world. Then again, she had beer on her. Probably backspit, too, from whoever had been drinking that beer. Hey, sexy mama, I'll give you my shirt. A boy near Paget started to take his tee off, and he wasn't wearing anything underneath. Anyone could tell that he'd had gym time. Suddenly, more shirts were being handed her way. Quickly, Paget took Max's shirt and made a beeline for the restrooms. She knew that her face was past fire engine red. She was blushing that deeply. past her hair color red. She'd seen chests before. She'd seen a man strip before. Well, she'd seen Gary, and her husband had been unimpressive. He'd gone to the gym and stuff, but wasn't into having muscles. Mainly he ran. Had to keep down the punch. Did it say something that she'd rather risk dirty shirt than deal with seeing a man's chest that she wasn't married to? She wondered. Or maybe it was because they were boys, not men. These college kids were half her age. She could have been their mom, if she'd had babies early, she thought ruefully. If she'd had babies at all, which didn't seem like it was going to happen. Tick, 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 said the biological clock. She'd been widowed for a year. She was on year 2 of her college education. There was no time nor money to date, and everyone at the college was younger than her, or a married teacher. Plus, it wasn't like she could date from the pool of people that she had used to belong to. Paget didn't belong with them anymore since she was now poor. And Paget really didn't know how to date. Gary had been her one and only. They had dated for half a year, and then he'd proposed. He'd done everything, the chasing, the asking, the paying. Paget had gone along with it and thought her future was set. Big laugh, that was. Paget waited for her turn in a stall and swapped out the soaking shirt for the dry one after she toweled herself off as best as she could with toilet paper. She smelled of beer. Some men would say that was sexy. Paget thought it was gross. In the old days, she would have thrown out the shirt and bought another. These days, she wrung it out as best as she could, wrapped it in toilet paper, and shoved it into her bag. She would wash it and see if it was salvageable. With a sigh, Paget exited the stall and looked into the bathroom mirror to see the now familiar wrinkle stare back from her head. Only now she had a wrinkled shirt that was far too big for her to match. Too casual as well, since she was wearing heels. Too bad. It was all she had, she reflected. To give herself confidence, Paget put on another layer of mascara and swiped the lip gloss over her lips. There. Squaring her shoulders in the ridiculously large Henley, she pushed the sleeves up to her elbows and hoped it wouldn't keep trying to fall off one of her shoulders. There was nothing else to do, so she left the safety of the washroom to rejoin the group, who were listening in awe to Max. Without skipping a beat, he offered his leg for Paget to perch on again and kept up the animated narrative. Brian was stuck. He couldn't get out. His arms were tangled straight up in the parachute that had gone wrong, and we were maybe 5,000 feet in the air. If he couldn't get untangled and get the emergency chute out, he was going to die when he hit the earth. The problem was, the wind kept the bunched-up parachute above his head, and he didn't have the strength to pull it down. No one did. He was lucky he hadn't ripped off his arms. The ground was getting closer, and I thought, he's screwed. If I hadn't pulled out my parachute, and I was the only one besides Brian that was plummeting that fast. I did the only thing I could do. As Paget sat, he wrapped an arm around her again, lightly resting a hand on her hip. That shirt looks good on you. Thanks, and thank you for the loan of it, she replied. The entire group leaned forward, waiting to see what he'd say as he took a sip of beer. What did you do? Adam all but screamed, needing to know right now. Max smiled. I had a pocket knife on me, and I cut the parachute so Brian's arms were free. I pulled the string that lets the damaged parachute release, and then pulled the emergency chute. Brian rocketed upward, and I waited long enough for him to clear before pulling my own cord for my parachute. Brian ended up with 2 dislocated shoulders. I broke an ankle and dislocated my knee when I landed, but hey, what are friends for? The group murmured with awe and amazement over Max's offhanded bravery. Paget herself was impressed and hoped he wasn't just making the story up. Even if he was, it was a great one, and no wonder the kids bought him drinks if he was giving that quality of entertainment every week. Skydiving? Paget asked. I used to, Max smiled. Max used to do a lot of things. Skydiving, mountain snowboarding, scuba diving for shipwrecks. Adam had a bit of case of hero worship. It was easy to see. Max laughed. Now I'm too old for that stuff. It's a young guy thing. Plus, I feel every bone I've ever broken each time there's rain. Wish I could do that sort of stuff. Adam gulped down some beer. Sasha agreed. I'd be too afraid, but it sounds awesome. You can, Max was confident. And at Adam's look of disbelief, he continued, if you can swim, you can snorkel. If you can snorkel, you can scuba. You might not be a skier, but skydiving is all about pulling the chute at the right time and being safe. It's thrilling. There was more conversation and more alcohol, and nachos flowed. Paget had to admit it was a pretty good time, and she really wasn't all that uncomfortable sitting perched on Max's leg. Finally, Paget had to call it a night. She was getting tired, and she had to work at the cafe tomorrow. The kids elected to stay, but Max walked her outside. Why don't I walk you home? He asked. It's okay, Paget assured him. She had only just met him, and her mother's voice of warning about all sorts of freaks to avoid was racing through her head, even though he'd been a perfect gentleman all night long. I've walked home plenty of times. In this neighborhood, at this time of night? Max shook his head. No, you definitely should have me walk you home. I won't come into your building, just make sure you get in okay. And then who will walk you home? Paget raised an eyebrow. Or is this a double standard thing? Definitely a double standard thing. How else do I get the hero if I don't walk you home? Max swung an arm around her shoulders. He was very friendly. Of course, it could be the slight buzz speaking. Everyone should have a chance to be a hero. I recommend it. Unfortunately, it has a downside. What's the downside? Paget rolled her eyes and pulled his arm off her shoulders. She decided he was harmless as she hooked her arm through his as they walked. He leaned in and whispered in her ear, "It's addictive." Really? Yes, Max nodded. I think I had one too many. Usually I don't drink this much, I mean. It makes you very happy, Paget said as she pulled him across the street when the light changed. Are you a hero a lot? I try. It doesn't always work like it should, though. You saved Brian. She remembered the guy from the story he told earlier. Brian was easy. It's the ones you work hard for and have no chance of saving that suck. He cleared his throat. Let's not talk about this, though. It's depressing. We're in an amazing city with beautiful stars. He squinted upward, and Paget involuntarily looked up as well. There was a lot of lights, but she didn't see any stars. Paget giggled. Max, I think I'd better walk you home. We're going in the right direction, he smiled down at her. It's light pollution. The reason we can't see the stars. It's light pollution. How do lights pollute? She humored him. They shine upward and blot out the stars. It's a real thing. Paget nodded. He was too happy. What's your address? My address? That place where you rest your head. I think I should walk you home. I'm not totally drunk, Max gently protested. I'm walking straight with your help. I'm not slurring or sloppy. I'll be fine now I learned I can't hold the booze like I used to. I won't be doing that again. Plus, it's more likely that a gorgeous girl like you could be hurt at this time of night. I'd feel really bad if something happened to you when I could have walked you home. Gorgeous girl, she repeated dryly. Okay, beautiful woman. Paget rolled her eyes. So you don't like compliments. Duly noted. However, that doesn't mean that I won't think them, or occasionally say them when I see you. You think you'll be seeing me again? Paget admired his optimism. She felt she could never be that confident. I know it, Max replied with a grin. I need to show you the stars, so that you can actually see them. We'll see. Paget steered him through Elm Park. It was the shortest way to her building. She skirted around a bench with an old man sleeping on it, but Max halted her. He made his way to the bench, talking quietly with the man a moment, and handed him money. They shook hands, and Max came back to Paget, putting an arm around her shoulder. Should you be doing that? What, helping Ed? Absolutely. You know him? Paget fumbled for her keys as they approached her building. Ed's harmless. He just has no place to go. The shelters only let you stay for a certain number of days, and he can't afford to live anywhere. His wife had cancer, and he used everything he had, including his retirement, to pay for her care. He gets a small pension, but it can't even get close to covering what he really needs in a city this expensive. Paget turned the lock and looked up at Max. She lived right off the park and had never bothered to find out about the people who lived there. She was a little afraid of them, actually. To hear Max talk about Ed, she now felt ashamed. That was really nice of you. I'm a nice guy, Max shrugged. He pulled out a business card and in the process dropped 3 others. I really would like to see you again, Paget. You're gonna get a cab, right? Paget asked as she took his card. I'll walk. It's a beautiful night, Max said as he scooped up the extra cards and shoved them back in his back pocket. She couldn't help but smile at him. Max knew that she was amused by him and leaned against the door jamb. Do you know the last time I got drunk? I thought you weren't drunk, just buzzed, she reminded him. It's a good buzz, too, Max agreed. The last time I was drunk was 6 years ago. I don't make this a habit. And then why did you drink a little too much tonight? He took her hand in his. I was nervous. You were nervous. Paget highly doubted this confident man who went thrill-seeking when he was younger was nervous. Adam talked up this poised, beautiful woman who I just had to meet. Part of me wondered if she wasn't too good for me. Did you meet her? She asked. I did. She likes expensive wine, Max smiled. Paget flushed, but before she could say anything in her defense, he spoke up. Wine, which I can't currently afford, which may have been why I was a little nervous. She seemed to like the house wine, though. I did. It was better than I expected, and I can understand not being able to afford expensive wine anymore. Paget gestured to the building she was now living in. Seems like both of us have taken a step down. Maybe, she whispered. She didn't much like her step down. She wondered what his had been like. His thumb was rubbing along the back of her hand. It was kind of nice. I learned a lot from taking a step down. More than I ever learned from taking steps up. What did you learn? Paget asked. Humility, kindness, who my friends were, how to make new friends, respect. Those are all very good things to learn. Max nodded very seriously. Important things. Max, you should go. Paget gently pulled her on her hand. Right, absolutely. As soon as you promise to give me a call. I need to show you those stars yet. Plus, it would be interesting to see what else we have in common. She smiled at his blatant flattery. Truth was, it was a balm to her soul to have him paying such attention to her. He made her feel sexy and beautiful, which she hadn't felt in a very long time. I'll call you. Max smiled happily and lifted her hand to kiss the back of it. That's all I ask. Paget watched him stumble as he turned. Are you sure you're going to be okay? I'm more than okay. I met you. He gave her a wave. Shaking her head, Paget closed the door of the apartment and watched through the glass as Max disappeared into the night. She looked at the business card. It simply said Max R, on time, on budget, followed by his number. Smiling, Paget put it away in her purse and went to her apartment. And that was Chapter 1 of The Reverse Cinderella by Josephine Beintema. Me. Book 2 of the Ramesly Brothers series. If you'd like to purchase this book, you can find it on Amazon.